I want to show you a really quick and fun exercise today. I have a tray here which fits an old piece of watercolour paper and some standard water that I will soak my already used paper in. It doesn't need to soak for long, but the longer your paper soaks, the better. I'll show you why in a minute. You take your paper, let it drip off so you remove the majority of the water. Put your paper horizontally or vertically as you like, and then you take your colours. I've got some Ecoline here, a gold and kind of reddish brown and a red. I've got some pipettes here. You can also use a brush if you have a brush. Some of the Ecoline that I have a little pipette inside, so they're easy to use. I'm not actually drying off the excess of the water, as you can see. And I'm adding a bit of water in various places. And I'm adding a bit of gold. And then, whilst your watercolour is still wet, you take your paper and you scrumple it up. So really mash it. Now, as this is Ecoline, it's not really watercolour, it's more like a colour that you get inside a marker pen. So it tends to stain really easily. If you don't want to get your hands stained, then I suggest you put a pair of gloves on. Once you've done your colour, then you open your paper and you leave it to dry. What you can do is, if you think there's some bits of your paper that hasn't got enough kind of colour on it, then you can always add a bit more. I'm just going to add a bit more gold. And once you've done this, you'll find that the paper actually gets dry really quickly, so you can easily add a bit more water. If you're adding more water to the colour that you've put on, then you basically help the colour move about on the paper a bit better. So then again, I just hold up my paper and then I open it, and then you leave it to dry. Here are some papers that I've done already, and as you can see, they turn out very creased, but that's okay, because I'll show you why in a minute. You can use the fact that they're creased. The thing that I would suggest you do and remember is that the papers, when they dry, the colours are not as clear as when you initially do them. So don't be afraid to use some powerful paint. The Ecoline is a type of paint that you get like inside marker pens, so it stains. As you can see, my hands are red from the one I just showed you, but you can also use watercolour, and I have some watercolour sheets that I've done here. As you can see, the front has turned out darker than the back, And here's one which I've actually put colour on top of a piece of watercolour paper where I had already some dry watercolour, so that's why it's turned out quite mottled. Sometimes though, it's fun to check the back side and just have a look to see what the back side looks like. Here's one where I've used blue and green with some gold on it. The other thing is, of course, you might like bright colours, but you might also just prefer your colours to be sort of a pastel and quite faded in look. Here's a big piece that I did. So you also want to just have a look on the back side of your paper. Sometimes it can actually turn out that you prefer the back of your paper to the front. So remember to check the back of your paper, especially if you're using dark colours like a dark purple or a dark blue, which is likely to kind of soak through your paper. Lastly, I want to just show you this, because basically what you can do once you have a piece of paper is you can kind of sit and just look at it for a while and then look at the creases. You might want to turn your paper over and just kind of look and see if you can find any sort of figures that eventually step out of the paper for you. What I've done with this piece of paper is I've actually crumbled it up about 7 to 8 times, and then I've used an oil pastel on top, and that gives you this sort of effect, whereas like I quite like in the horse here, he has this sort of texture in his fur, and the same in the trousers here of the child. Here I've used oil pastel for all of the thing that I've drawn up. So you draw up your image with maybe a pencil first, and then you can use oil pastel, and then, you know, with a paper tip to go over the oil pastel in the top and in the hat. That's just one way, but I would suggest that you scrumple up your paper before you put the oil pastel on, because otherwise your oil pastel's gonna go everywhere. And then, you know, if you want to, you can put a sort of black outline around your image that you've drawn up to give it a bit more of a sort of a stand out kind of feel. That's all for this video. I hope it's inspired you to go and try something yourself like this.